The Supreme Court in America legalized bribery. Part that might shock people is America's become the single most corrupt country on earth. Okay. So why? Because we legalized bribery. It's not even illegal anymore. You just pay the politicians and you own them. You own them 100%. And they will serve you no matter what you do.
I want to point this back at you and ask a difficult question, right? You've received, or the Young Turks has received $24 million, right, from a private equity firm and a venture capital firm. And you tell people that they're naive when somebody receives $500,000 and that doesn't impact their interest. But your company has received 24 from corporate interests.
Yeah.
How can you say that doesn't affect you and yet point that outwards? A lot of this is undergirded by support from donors. So let's say, for example, in the case of Israel, which you just said, we have AIPAC, which makes a big impact on politics. Trump is kind of seen as an outside of establishment figure, what you might call a populist figure. However, he's also accepted something in the range of $330 million from the Adelson family, right? So for our European watchers who don't really quite get this, because I think it can actually be quite hard to grasp, can you give a concise account of just how influential money is in American politics and the different roles it plays in making politicians what you call either corrupt or morons?
Yeah. And yeah, it's a good point about morons because they're purposeful morons. They're being morons on purpose to suit the needs of their donors. Okay, first I'll break it down super simple in a way that everybody can understand. And then I'll tell you something that'll shock people and then I'll explain it. Okay.
Sounds great.
So super simple way to understand is the Supreme Court in America legalized bribery. They just made bribery legal.
Can you be specific what you mean by that? Because obviously bribery carries with it a legalistic sentiment. So
that's right. So I'll explain that. So the part that might shock people is, unfortunately, and I love America, America's become the single most corrupt country on earth. It makes Afghanistan look pure and clean in their politics. Okay. So why? Because we legalized bribery. It's not even illegal anymore. You just pay the politicians and you own them. You own them 100%. And they will serve you no matter what you do. Okay. So let me give an explanation and examples. So the Supreme Court in 1976, and I talk about this in my book, Justice is Coming. It's chapter 4, the most important chapter. If all you do is read chapter 4, please do that. It explains how the Democratic...
Always read chapter 4, I think.
Yeah. The Democratic Party, it explains how the Democratic Party got taken over by corporate rule. The Republicans were already serving corporate rule, so then they got a monopoly in America. And how did they do that? In 76 and 78, two decisions, Bellotti and Buckley. And the Supreme Court began to legalize bribery. What does it mean? They said, if it's first it was a ballot measure and then later it became elections, you could spend, in the beginning they said corporations can spend money on politicians. Already that was nuts. And so human beings, if you want to donate, that's an argument we can have. But corporations, they only have one goal, especially in America, maximize profit. If you allow them to donate to politicians, they will donate only for that purpose, and they, against all of the voters, should have never been allowed. And the dissenting justices said, we're signing America's death warrant. It's only a matter of time before democracy dies because corporations will be able to buy all of our politicians. And that's exactly what happened. And then in Citizens United, they put it into hyperdrive. So last time I was at Oxford, we debated Citizens United. I debated the guy who won that case, the lawyer who won that case, and the top First Amendment lawyer in America, Floyd Abrams, won 2-1. Why? Am I a better lawyer than those guys? No, because my side is so obvious. So when corporations give unlimited money to politicians, they buy them in an unlimited way. So, but it's not just corporations; it's also human beings, and so and sometimes it's combined. So the Adelson family has an enormous company, and they make money through gambling, and so they have casinos in Vegas. But their largest and most profitable casinos are in Macau, China. Okay. And so that family has given $337 million in campaign contributions to Donald Trump. Now, pause there. Every other country, you've got to be totally confounded. Wait, what do you mean? That can't be right. No, it's literal. In 3 different elections, 2016, 100 million roughly, 2020, 100 million roughly. This time we know at least 137 million. And a lot of this doesn't even include the dark money. Dark money you can't even trace where it comes from, which is mental. It could come from a Russian oligarch. It could come from a serial killer. We can't trace the money. The Supreme Court said you're not allowed to see where the money's coming from, and we've legalized unlimited bribery. So they're literally giving hundreds of millions of dollars to our politicians. And so what did Trump do? He put in 4 people in his administration that served Miriam Adelson and Israel loyally. Marco Rubio's State Department, Elise Stefanik, our UN ambassador, Mike Waltz, our national security advisor, and Huckabee, who's our ambassador to Israel. They're all neocons. They all want war. They all say that America should support Israel above all else. Not only that, now they've started arresting people in America for criticizing Israel. I don't know if I'm going to be arrested when I go back. So they've taken away the First Amendment in America. Trump just put out an executive order saying, if you're considered anti-Semitic, what does that mean? Who defines anti-Semitic? And that's not a thing anyway. The First Amendment allows you to be racist, anti-Semitic, Islamophobe, transphobe. It doesn't mean you're allowed to do any of those things in America. But now all of a sudden, if you criticize Israel, we're going to put you in jail or we're going to deport you. Why? Because they literally bought Donald Trump. They bought all the politicians. But if you get mad at Donald Trump, don't worry, Joe. They bought Joe Biden for a lot less. AIPAC, which is a lobby, which is a little bit different than the Adelson family, right? Adelson family has corporate interests, personal interests. By the way, he was up on massive corruption charges in China, and Trump, in his first term, let that go for a tiny fine because he got bribed, right? And so, I mean, then they lowered the estate tax. They lowered the taxes to bring money from China to America from 35% to 8%. The Adelsons made billions. And at this point in American politics, if you're not bribing an American politician, you're not doing business right. Like they might be able to remove you as CEO if you're not bribing politicians in America because it's malpractice. They will do anything you want. By the way, that was just for campaign contributions. That's plenty enough for them to completely control the politicians. That's their power, fame, status, and their ability to make money in other ways, right?
Yeah.
But
I have an example, actually, if you don't mind, from your book, which I think is great. First of all, yes, it's actually shocking. I can't remember if it was a student or professor from Columbia, but has been detained. His family still don't know where he are. So that's a huge problem. Let's stick to the money for the moment. An example from your book, which I really like, is that there's 139 climate deniers in Congress who've received $61 million total from fossil fuel companies, large corporations, which is just under $500,000 on average each. I'm sure it's a lot more for some, a lot less for some. And the analysis you draw in your book is you'd be stupid to think that if somebody's donating corporate money or receiving so much corporate money, no matter what they say, clearly there's a link and clearly there's going to be some motivational link in how they behave in Congress. Can you lay out psychologically how that constitutes really quite good evidence, even though they'll officially say that those donations don't influence their attitude in Congress?
So to be fair, I want people to understand, I don't mean the voters, because the voters have no idea. What I'm telling you in this podcast is said 0 times in mainstream media. CNN, MSNBC, New York Times, Washington Post, they never, ever explain the bribery. And you want to know why? They're the largest beneficiary of corruption. Because where does all the money in politics go? It goes to ads in mainstream media. So the New York Times and CNN will never tell you that all the politicians are utter crooks, and they know it. Okay, and the thing is, they're not all liars. Everybody's in a bubble, and they become, you could say, the victim, or in the case of the media, a willing victim of groupthink. So if you guys were on ABC or CNN right now and we were in America, you would be outraged at everything I'm saying. Absolutely outraged. You'd be like, oh, you think $337 million affects a politician? That's outrageous. That sounds like a conspiracy theory.
Not just the politician, anyone who's given that money, right, is going to be influenced by that money.
Of course. But the great majority of American voters, because right-wing media never talks about it and mainstream media never talks about it, although right-wing media has changed lately. We can get into that. But in the past, would never, ever, ever talk about it. And even they call MSNBC left-wing media in America, which is hilarious. It's just a giant corporation that sheep herds you into the same exact economic policies as Fox News, right? So do they ever tell their audience? No. So I don't blame the voters at all. They don't even understand what's happening in America because our media is nothing but propaganda in America, okay? So now, but when it comes to the reporters, guys, I know you're suffering from groupthink, and I know that you're in a bubble and don't realize it. I'm talking to American reporters now, especially ones that cover national politics. But you really have to be the dumbest people alive to think $500,000 is not going to affect someone. That $1 million, $2 million, $10 million, $300 million is not going to affect someone. You would have to be a blithering idiot drooling out of the side of your mouth to think, oh no, I bet a normal human being isn't affected by $3.5 million. Have you ever met a human being? Right? But the most serious reporters in America will be outraged by that statement. They'll say, no way, it doesn't affect them. Maybe a little bit, but not worth discussing. I'm like, we're about to vote on a budget resolution right now in America. They never talk about the donors. You think the donors don't affect the fact that the Republicans are asking for $4.5 trillion in tax cuts after they all got bribed by corporate donors and super rich donors? Those are the exact people getting the $4.5 trillion tax cut. You think that they don't have to take it from somewhere? No, they have to take it from somewhere. Where do they take it? Do they take it from the rich? No. They're going to cut $800 billion from Medicaid because those are the poor and the lower middle class, and they have no lobbyists. They can't bribe the politicians. So they always take it out on the average American, and every moron reporter in America is like, no, I don't see any money in politics. It sounds conspiratorial. No, golly gee, I bet they thought the $4.5 trillion in tax cuts was the moral thing to do. The right thing. Come on, guys. They believe in supply side economics. No, they don't. They believe in a robbery, and you sound like pathetic schmucks. So, but I'm the bad guy in America. Like, so this is a normal, in the UK, you're probably not surprised by anything else. I mean, you might be surprised at how bad it is in America, but you're not surprised by my conclusions, right? But in America, because this wall-to-wall propaganda, I've been saying this stuff for 20 years. And every time I go on media to say it, it was utter shock and disbelief. They nearly kicked me out of NPR. They're like, oh, how can you say these things? Like, I say, okay, Mitch McConnell, Republican, takes $1 billion in donations throughout his career. $1 billion. He distributes to other Republicans. He's a Republican leader, okay? And is that corrupt? You could actually get most Democratic voters to say, yeah, of course, that terrible Republican leader is very corrupt. I hate Mitch McConnell. And I say, Nancy Pelosi, the Democratic leader, also took $1 billion in donations, largely from the same people. She's also corrupt. They're like, get him out of here. Get him out of here. That's outrageous. He's insulting the beloved Nancy Pelosi. She's a master strategist. She's an angel. Get him off the air. And literally NPR voters yelling. That never happens. In America, NPR, everybody whispers, right? But they were furious for me for pointing out the most obvious things that the whole rest of the world knows. I mean, look here, just real quick. I'm Mahmoud Khalil, who was arrested by ICE. So, he's a pro-Palestinian protester on Colombia. I went to Colombia, and I'm embarrassed at what's happening to Colombia, how Colombia has reacted, et cetera. But so they have no evidence that he did anything wrong, broke any laws. He was just the leader of the peace protests. So they now have him in a secret prison in Louisiana, we think, but the government won't tell us where he is. He's been made to disappear in America as Israel's political prisoner. Because if you do protests against Israel, now because Donald Trump is so corrupt and has taken so much bribes from the Adelson family, and Joe Biden took $11 million from AIPAC, that's what I was referring to earlier. Kamala Harris, in this election cycle alone, took $5 million from AIPAC and other Israeli lobbies, or lobbies in favor of Israel. And so they're all corrupt. They all serve Israel 100%. That's why they're now literally arresting people in America if you disagree with Israel. And yet, when I go say this in American media, they'll call me an anti-Semite. They'll say that I'm a terrorist, and then they'll start a debate about whether to arrest me, even though I'm an American citizen. So if that's not fascist, what is it?
Yeah, it's definitely shocking to view from the outside. Again, there was no charge or official arrest. There was no warrant or anything like that for Mahmoud Khalil. So we really, really hope that some more details come out on that soon. To stick on the money point now, you say absolute power corrupts absolutely. You're quoting. But anyway, you say, for example, with these climate deniers, 500,000, 1 million, 3 million from corporate interests, obviously corrupt merely by the fact of that donation. So I want to point this back at you, and I want to point this back at you and ask a difficult question, right? You've received, or the Young Turks has received, $24 million, right, from a private equity firm and a venture capital firm. The private equity firm, in fact, was run by a former Republican, I believe, and the venture capital firm, okay, a chairman at Disney, right? So you've received that kind of money. These are people for whom profit is immensely important and whose interests are aligned with people for whom profit is immensely important. And you tell people that they're naive when somebody receives 500,000 and that doesn't impact their interest. But Your company has received 24 from corporate interests.
Yeah.
How can you say that doesn't affect you and yet point that outwards, right?
Yeah, super easy. You think it's a difficult question. It's actually a very simple question. So what you should look for in the terms of a media corporation is it, there's several different factors, but in terms of investment or money put into a company, is it an investment or is it a gift? So for example, Prager University would get $25 million a year from right-wing billionaires, and it was a gift. Well, is it a gift or are you paying for propaganda, right? Because normally in capitalism, when somebody gives you money, they expect a return on investment. In this case, they're saying, no, go ahead and do whatever you want. Well, of course, not whatever you want, the message we want. So they're paying for propaganda, okay? So in our case, it was an investment, the most obvious, clear capitalist thing in the world, okay? So the private equity company you're referring to is the Roamers, and so they're, I didn't even know that they were a private equity company, but no problem. If they are, they are, okay? But what they did was a simple loan to us. So they loaned us $4 million. We paid back the interest and the principal. That's it. Simple business transaction. If you say you can't do that, I'll get to the next one, the venture capital one in a second. If you say you can't do that, that means you can't run any business because you need money to start a business. You need an investment money.
Sure, but they have corporate interests, right? And yes, they're investing and it's technically business, right? But that in some way means there's also more strings, right? Because those people who were donated to in Congress, those Congress people, right? There's zero strings, it's not even, we want a return on investment, strictly speaking. It's just, hey, we're technically giving this to you. And you say, look, it's naive to think that they'll just give that money, right?
Yeah.
In the same way, they may be making an investment, right? But if, for example, you were to sufficiently harm their interests, they wouldn't donate to you, even if it were going to be somewhat profitable for them, because they know that your influence, right, and the amount that corporations are taxed, for example, and so on and so forth, that's important to them also. So you're going to claim there's absolutely no link between them being huge, high financial institutions, which, by the way, is the epitome of profit seeking in America, and that's got nothing to do with the protection of corporate interests when it comes to you, but not with other people.
But you said two different things there, brother. You said profit seeking. That is true. That's exactly what they're doing. They're a finance company. To my knowledge, I don't know that much about them, but and we gave that money back a long time ago, 8 years ago now. So they're a finance company. So what are they interested in? Profit seeking. So they made a deal. So it wasn't like, hey, I'm giving you this money and strings attached for opinions. No, the strings attached was, I want more money back.
But corporation tax harms profit, right? So they would get less money back if you had enough of an influence.
Right. So let me get
politics,
to that part.
Right?
So in all of our contracts, whether it's the Roamers or it's the VCs that we did deal with, we have complete editorial control. So the deal is you put money in, it's an investment, you're going to get money out, okay? You're going to get a profit out. And some people on the left hate that. They're like, don't do that. But they don't realize there's literally no other way to set up a media company. And so what you would do if you agreed with the left of don't do profit seeking, don't do investments, is that you would have no one on the left that could fight back as a media company. Now, in terms of what do they get in return? Again, they get profit in return. And so if they wanted what they got out of PragerU and some of the right-wing organizations, et cetera, they wanted marketing propaganda for other beliefs that they have, well, they came to the wrong people, because in our contracts, we say you have no editorial control, and so you can't touch that, okay? So now you turn to so they got interest, just like a bank would, just like anyone would, and so we paid that money back, fine. The VCs put in $20 million, and yes, by the way, Jeffrey Katzenberg, who you're referring to, which was part of
the chairman of Disney,
DreamWorks, et cetera. Wonderful guy, super smart guy.
Oversaw Shrek, Russ, so that's something we can be happy about.
What's that?
He oversaw the making of Shrek, so that's something we can be happy about.
Yes, oversaw the making of a lot of movies that you love. Now, he and I massively disagree in politics. He is a corporate establishment Democrat. Okay. By the way, another one of our funders was Graycroft, and their founding partner is Alan Patricof. Another guy, wonderful guy. We get along perfectly great, but massively establishment Democrat. So in the primaries, we fight each other harder than anybody does. They support Hillary Clinton. They support Joe Biden. I support Bernie Sanders. And our two sides go to war, even though we're in the same company. Or we were, okay? So they still have 5%. We basically bought them out as well, okay? So they no longer have the kind of interest that they had. They're no longer on the board, et cetera. And why did they put money in? Even though they disagree with our politics, for profit. And so again, if you say don't take any investments just for them making pure profit, then you literally won't be able to compete with Fox, Daily Wire, or any of the right-wing organizations.
Fair enough. Just we can leave it here and I'll pass on to Ollie, but
Yeah.
I just want to kind of clarify it. To some, it may seem that you're saying, well, if they receive money, they're going to be influenced. But and it's sure it may be true, Cenk is a moral person. I'm not influenced by money, right?
So, but
do you understand
Of
how
course
it
I
might
understand
sound?
it. Of course I understand it. But guys, I keep saying it, and I want you to understand it. Number one, you have to look at their incentives. What are they trying to get? When they give to a politician, are they trying to do it for general welfare, for charity, or to make a bigger profit for ExxonMobil, right? When they give to any media organization for free, are they trying to influence what they're saying, their message, et cetera, or are they getting something else? But when they are doing it for getting an interest rate back or a return back or a profit back, that is their motivation. That is their incentive. So you don't need to add another incentive. I want to give, let's make up numbers. I want to give 10 and get $1 million back. That's my incentive. I don't need any further incentive than that, right? So if you say that biases you, then that biases everyone, and then no one could ever start any company. Do you see what I'm saying? That's a giant, giant difference. Yeah. And second of all, if you say in the paperwork that they don't have editorial control, then you've literally taken an extra step that no one else takes to safeguard your true opinions and make sure that your opinions are not affected by the money, even if the money is just trying to make a profit. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, thank you.
You think $1 million affects a politician?
Well, not just the politician, anyone who's given that money, right?
Of course.
Right, so you've received that kind of money, and you tell people that they're naive when somebody receives $500,000 and that doesn't impact their interest.
The Supreme Court in America legalized bribery. Almost every politician is an idiot who can't strategize. Every Republican politician is a liar and a crook. If you don't have private health insurance, we just simply let you die.